we want to foster those relationships. Like every customer is valuable to us, and like we build all those tools like our dashboard to support multiple coins, so that like you can have those effects where you say like, okay, if I buy a token and it's listed on staking facilities, I just go to the website and it's done. And not like, like we want to scale our business, right? And so if you always have the same acquiring costs and you start over again with every network you're doing that, I don't think that's the best way to do it. Yeah.
Layer 1 is a podcast and community dedicated to helping you master all things crypto. We'll be bringing you the best interviews with project executives, technical analysis for trading of the most popular cryptocurrencies, and insight into what's actually happening behind the scenes.
As you join us each episode, you're going to hear about tokens, fundraisers, investments, and even crypto conspiracies. But please remember that nothing we say should be considered financial or legal advice.
Come join us on this journey, and welcome to Layer 1. Morning, good evening, good night. We are having another Layer 1 episode here. We are coming to you on a Thursday. I think this episode is going to be released on Friday, so happy Friday to everyone listening to this. We have a super awesome episode in front of us with staking facilities. I have Dimitri with me. We are going to get after it today. So, Dimitri, how you doing, man?
Yeah, I'm doing great. Good morning, good afternoon, good night to everyone who's listening. So yeah, the duo is back. We obviously have an interesting guest here. We're going to talk all about staking. We're going to talk about broad market as always. So yeah, Q, who do we got?
Yeah, we have Florian Liss, technical lead from Staking Facilities. This is going to be an interesting interview because I feel like Sutler Ventures has some crossover with what Staking Facilities actually does. So it's going to be like a super in-depth interview, and staking obviously is on the minds of a lot of people in crypto today. So we'll get to Florian now. Florian, how are you doing, man?
I'm doing super great. Thank you for the invite to this podcast. Yeah, I'm really excited.
Yeah, Florian's in Munich, so it's afternoon for him. So good afternoon, Florian. But we have
it's almost evening, so
there you go. So we will get to your background as you kind of made it into crypto here. I think you went to university in Munich. I know maybe somewhere in Germany. But if you could go through your background, kind of like as a young kid and maybe growing up and maybe finding tech and then finding crypto. Let's start with your background.
Yeah, so like I've been always like interested in like tech, and like my father already, he studied informatics and like really early days. So I've been like introduced to technology at a very young age. And so it was like quite obvious for me that I want to do like a career somewhere in this space. And so I studied like in Germany, I studied information systems, which is like a mixture of like computer science and like economics. And so that fitted quite well where I ended up now. And yeah, like how I got into the crypto is basically in like 2016, I was still looking for some credits for a university at Technical University Munich. So you were right about that. And like I came across this seminar, which was called like blockchains and how can public governments use them. And like I knew about blockchains before, I knew how Bitcoin worked and stuff like that, but I never really got like the impact, to be honest, about it. And so like this was like the first point I really sat down and like programmed something myself for a blockchain. So we started writing smart contracts for like use cases we thought about it like governments could use. So for example, like how could you like trade visas over a blockchain? How could you like do stuff like that? And then from there, I jumped into writing my master thesis about trading like emission certificates over Ethereum and stuff like that. And yeah, so at that point of time, I met over a friend, Robert. I met my two co-founders, and we realized that we have a lot of in common and a lot of stuff to talk about. And like, yeah, this was like 2017 in the beginning, and we started like talking or arguing about how blockchain will look like in a few years. And like the thing we could agree on is that there's stuff that needs to be changed, especially like on the consensus layer. And so we ended up with staking, and we said like, this is something that's really hot. And so we founded Staking Facilities.
And what year was that when you found the staking facilities?
So I think if you look at the public records, it probably says 2016 still, but like the decision that we were going to be like validators was 2017.
Gotcha. Yeah, it's interesting that you mentioned that you did your thesis on carbon credits trading. And, you know, that because that I remember, you know, when I was back in trading, that used to be a very hot sector. It's actually probably still hot sector right now. So did that end up going anywhere? Did the government, you know, did you try to approach it to, you know, help them out in that area, or was it just kind of a thesis you put out for the public to see?
I think like when I wrote it, like I just put it out there and I got approached by a few people asking me like if I want to go further into that. But for me, it was like rather I realized that the technology, like Ethereum at that point of time, wasn't probably ready to handle it. And there's so many other like regulatory problems with carbon trading in the EU that like the whole trust thing is a big issue, and there's a lot of stuff you can solve with it, but the major problems come from somewhere else. So yeah, no, I didn't pursue it in that way.
Gotcha.
So we kind of made it up into you guys founding staking facilities. You know, we've been involved in several staking projects up to this point, you know, back in like 2016, 2017, even some of the guys at ICO, we were personally like running nodes on Lisk and things like that. So I wonder, you guys started staking facilities. What networks did you start with, and what was kind of the thesis? And we're going to have like the governance decisions or the discussions later, but what were kind of the decisions behind your first networks that you guys chose to spin up validators or nodes?
So like the thing to mention here is like the first projects we decided we buy into, so we participated in an ICO, so we bought tokens somewhere, were not the first projects that we actually launched, just because timelines changed so much over time. But like the thing we took like most time to work on was actually Cosmos. So this was where I actually got really introduced into the whole validating community. And like, this is still where I refer to if people want to see who are the quality validators. But like the first thing we actually launched was Tezos, which for us was like a really, really nice way to start this whole thing, because it was for us, it was like a proof of concept that we can actually provide a good service, a reliable service, show that we have some experience and that we know what we're doing. And so we started Tezos there. And the great thing about Tezos is that you don't have slashing for your customers. So even if we like, without our, like at that point of time, we didn't have any credibility, like we didn't have any reputation, right? So for us, it was like, we can show it here and people are probably willing to take the risk to lose a few rewards, but they will not lose their stake tokens, which is really important.
At least initially, why did you push people towards the validators on Cosmos, and what do they do specifically that makes you think that these are a good validator set to kind of use as an example?
Yeah, so like, I mean, the Cosmos timeline like changed a lot before it really launched. And so we had like more than a year of people actually being in like test nets actively and like growing together. Like at the beginning, there weren't any standards on how to use like sentry nodes or stuff like that. This was all introduced during this like testnet phases. We had a game of stakes where we all could prove that we all not only can run a testnet, which is like idling and no one is sending transactions, but actually like we can handle the load if someone is attacking us, and we know where to look. And you saw that like the majority of validators just knew what was the problem right away, how do we fix it, and how do we work together to do that. And this is something where I still say today, probably most networks would be crushed by that.
Right. Yeah. No, I agree. You know, it's interesting when we were back in New York for Consensus, me and Q went to an event called like Staking and Validators. And it was interesting to see actually most of the people were there for Cosmos. So it was making pretty big, like, you know, presence there. And a lot of people were excited, you know, for the mainnet launch and so on. So that was definitely on the radar for a lot of the people. So let's talk about more about staking facilities. There's a lot of, I guess, or a couple staking services available right now in the market. What do you guys are targeting? Who are you targeting? Who would use staking facilities in your services?
So first of all, we are open to anyone. We don't say we only take institutionals. We don't say we only take whales, or we also don't say we're not interested in institutionals. It's just those are different people with different needs, right? So a institutional player will probably talk about custodial solutions. They will talk about tax reporting, auditing, stuff like that. While the smaller fish will probably more be hey, how much fee do I have to pay? How much rewards do I actually get? Or I don't understand how the staking works. Can you help me? Are you available for me if I have any issues? Stuff like that. And so we try to give everyone the things they need. So for us, our regular customers, this is basically we build tools for you. And we've heard from many people that our tools are actually quite good for UX and blockchain. Let's say it like that. I don't want to brag or something, but we always we have some friends we always try it out with who are no technology experts or something like that. They're just regular people who have a few tokens, and if they understand how it works, then we put it live. So for example, when Cosmos launched, the only way to delegate was via command line. And we saw that and we were okay, this is a no-go, because first of all, you need to teach people how to install it, where to install it from, is it a secure source, stuff like that. And so what we did is we built a delegation tool to our website. It's still live and it still works, which a lot of people used at that point of time, and a lot of other validators built their own versions of it, just because the number one problem we still have is education and user experience, I would say.
All right. No, absolutely. And I looked at your website. You have pretty nice tools there in terms of managing your portfolio and diversification, things that you can do there. That's for sure. So, speaking of that, service that you do for the people that want to participate and earn these rewards, what is the fee, that you guys are taking?
So we usually try to keep a competitive fee. So we're never the most expensive validator in the network, but we're also not the cheapest one most of the time. So we're somewhere in the middle where we say it makes sense for us. We can still pay for security of our own network, our own setup. We can provide backups. We can spend time on actual on-chain governance and stuff like that, because all of that costs money as a company. Yeah, but we're still trying to keep it affordable for everyone, because that's also something we saw really early in Cosmos is if there's someone who has an advantage, for example, having no reason to pay for data centers, he will put the commission down and everyone will have to follow.
Yeah, one of the discussions we have at Sutler Ventures when we kind of we're moving from, or maybe not moving is the right, but evolving to new networks, transitioning maybe to new networks, is the idea that there are power users that maybe follow staking facilities or Sutler, and just what you guys are doing at staking facilities. So when you do maybe move to Kusama, or you do start to run your node on Ethereum or validator on Hedera and things like that, that the user will then follow and invest in not only what they're doing, but also what staking facilities is doing. So I wonder, of the users that you have, is it just you guys spin up nodes on Kusama or one of these networks, and you are attracting the users from that network just from the marketing that you do within those communities? Or is it users that maybe started with you guys on Cosmos that are now moving to this new network and investing alongside you guys?
So I would say the majority definitely comes from those networks. They already have the token, they know they have to stake it or they lose out on rewards, and now they're looking for who is doing that for me. So this is the regular user, but we also see quite some people who started with us at one project. They looked at our portfolio, they said okay, I like what I'm seeing, and I'm just liking the customer service, so I'll stay with those guys. And if those guys like write an article about a new project, like for example now Solana. We've been pushing that quite a lot recently. We hear back from our customers like, hey, where can I buy it? Like, when is staking starting? I want to get in. So I would say we see those effects as well. Yeah.
Going forward, staking facilities, your users mainly want to come from other networks, or are you looking to kind of foster those relationships and kind of foster that user base within your own platform?
We want to foster those relationships. Like, every customer is valuable to us, and like we build all those tools like our dashboard to support multiple coins, so that like you can have those effects where you say like, okay, if I buy a token and it's listed on staking facilities, I just go to the website and it's done. And not like, like we want to scale our business, right? And so if you always have the same acquiring costs and you start over again with every network, you're doing that. I don't think that's the best way to do it. Yeah.
Interesting. So I guess this is the best time to bring this up. I actually was on a call with Rob from Staking Facilities, one of your team members, and he was walking us through, not that he needed to, but I also wanted to kind of just talk with you guys. So we had Rob on a call, kind of walking us through the edgeware staking for you guys, which was an interesting concept. There's still some like UX issues, that still exist even for more experienced users, but that was great. I wonder how much time you guys spend actually doing that every day, right? Like walking these users through how to stake for staking facilities.
So one-on-one calls don't happen that often. Most people just want like a quick answer to a quick question on Telegram or via email. But if someone is asking for it, we're always up for it. So I would say right now it's probably like once a week that someone really comes and asks for a call. But yeah, there's like, we're always happy to communicate with our customers. We're always happy to know where our problems, what are the needs, stuff like that. And as you mentioned right now, like in edgeware, like in Kusama and Polkadot, like there's still a lot of problems with UX and staking and a lot of like open questions. And so I can tell you right now, we're working on something there as well. Yeah.
Nice. Yeah. You're absolutely right. Customer service and that hand holding is definitely something that's needed in this industry, especially, given the fact that like the UX and all these things are pretty complex, to regular users, and a lot of, services that are being provided, they don't really have maybe the capacity or they don't want to do like, it's not their focus to do customer service. So I think that's definitely, a huge thing for you guys, to help everybody out and kind of, clear up a lot of things that they might have questions for you. But I want to ask you, like other staking services like Stake, for example, they tend to focus like, a lot of institutional, they have a group of institutional clients that basically, they'll listen to them, and if they want, let's say, to add a new staking protocol to their system, then they will add it only if that group of people, of their clients, really demand it, right? So really, they listen, and depending on what their institutional clients want, they introduce those products. But for you guys, what would it be? Let's say, what would it cost to like, introduce a new protocol or new staking system, on staking facilities? What do you guys, how do you guys go through vetting maybe some of these protocols or picking new protocols to add to your platform?
So you mean like the decision process?
Right, exactly.
Yeah. Okay. So like it's correct that other like staking providers usually like they have a list of institutional clients. If someone says like, let's list IOTA, they would probably do it. The difference between them and us is we're completely self-funded, and we are always trying to keep skin in the game. So we always invest our own personal money into those projects to keep a certain self-bond on our validators. So that means like we only launch projects where we invest in, and we cannot invest in every project that comes along. So most of our investments are from like 2016, 17, so like quite early. And at that point, we mostly looked at stuff like we said like needs to happen to make blockchain big. And for us, this was at that point interoperability. We saw in 2017, we saw all those chains popping up, right? And we said like, okay, like we need some way for them to interact with each other. It's like in the internet, like isolated chains wouldn't make sense for us. So we invested in Polkadot, we invested in Cosmos, we invested in Aeon, stuff like that. So this is basically how we decided which projects to look at, and then like how to invest basically has many factors, like what is the team doing, what is their long-term vision for the network, what programming language are they writing in, because it makes huge differences, especially for us. Like we need to look at those node codes, and like we need to know how to react to certain stuff. There's so many. There's like business development. It's like communication and documentation of their technology, because what you often see is basically a really well-written white paper, followed by an ICO, IEO, or something like that. And then you're actually like, okay, that's cool. Let's look into what is the technology actually about, and you find nothing. Like you don't know where to start, who to ask. There's nothing to read up upon. Like GitHub is basically the README page, and that's it. So stuff like that really makes a huge difference. Yeah, nice. But also like token economics, of course.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's funny. Yeah, if you read a white paper and then it's like it seems legit, right? But then he starts digging further, and you find out all these things that you might not notice. So that would actually bring me to the next question. For somebody who's like hopping into staking facilities, and they see all these different ones that they can participate in. How would they choose which one? If somebody's new, kind of like, should I just spread all my cap across all of them, diversify, or should I just invest in one that gives the most APR? Like, what would you say to those guys?
I think it really depends on the user. So we have users who are really like they love risk, they love high appreciation rates, and we have some that are like more like usual investors would be, and they're like happy with like 2% or something like that. Mm-hmm. And yeah, so I would say it totally depends on the user. I wouldn't put all my money into one project. I would always hedge it. And like, for example, what I would look at is stuff like, if I really want to stake all my money, how long does it take for me to get my money out of the system? So for example, in Cosmos, it's 21 days. In Tezos, as a user, you don't have any unbonding time. So those are huge differences. Like if I say like I want my money to be available on day X, I should make a decision upon then. If I say like, oh yeah, I'll keep it there for a year anyway, so it doesn't really matter to me, it's a totally different decision. So I would say take a look at all those projects, and if you have questions, you can always come to us, you can ask us, like we're happy to suggest something. Although we don't do actual investment advice, we just give you like the pros and cons of those networks.
Yeah, your front end website shows maybe asset staking to you guys. So I think it's around like 11 million. I did see on Twitter that number might be 18 million. So I don't know which number actually is there. But you also have like a user number of like 700, 800 users. I wonder like how much of that is actually made of whales, and how much of that is dispersed evenly? Is it more of just an even distribution, or do you see a ton of like big users as well as like smaller users that have maybe $100, $200 that they're staking in staking facilities?
So like, first of all, the number on our website, those are live numbers. So like if it's 11 million today, it has been over 20 million at one point. It always depends on the price of those assets. Yeah, so we are totally open about that. But the other question basically is how, like, what's our user base? And it's very mixed. Like we have some whales, like non-institutional whales, who make a big impact on your delegation size, but there are a few of them. We have a lot of people in the range of like $1,000 to $10,000 in one project. And then we have a lot of people who have like $50 to $100 or something like that. So in the end, I would say like the whales and institutionals make probably like 40 to 50% of our like customers in US dollar right now. And the other half is like small fish, I would say.
Got it. Got it. I feel like Dimitri here when I say this, but how do you manage the volatility of the assets that you are in, right? Like you have to take a strong stake in the network, unlike maybe some of the other staking services. Are you hedging that risk at all? And then do you kind of like educate users at all on how maybe they could hedge against the volatility of the asset?
So we have some plans where we say, like, if those networks go into the next bull market or something like that, or if something like moons, we will adjust our portfolio. We know some ways to short certain parts of our portfolio to basically guarantee that if those networks drop in price, that we will still be profitable. But we don't do it like automatically, or we don't have certain strategies that always work. It's also like most of those coins we work with don't have a big short community where you can just go and do that. With our private investments, we of course do that. We hedge, but like with our customers, we are really careful about the regulatory situation here in Europe, with giving advice about what to do and what not to do, and telling people to short something is probably a bit out of our scope. But if you ask us, like, what should I do to hedge a certain risk, we can advise you where to look.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, you're right. You know, it's hard to find the counterparties when you're trying to, hedge some of that risk through a short. Like you mentioned. So yeah, absolutely. So I'm hoping the market will mature enough and there will be enough liquidity and products available to be, to do this essentially, right? Because then you're locking in the the APR, whatever you're getting from the rewards, and you can count on that for the year and hedge out some of that price of volatility. Because if the price of the token goes down, and you're still getting those rewards, yeah, you're getting subsidized a little bit to the downside, but it can really drop more than the APR that they are providing. So I'm definitely looking forward to, especially if providing a service like this for people, once these products are available, that's going to be huge in onboarding, new clients. So Q took that question from me. So I just wanted to mention that, but I wanted to also talk a little bit about just in general about these, protocols and networks, right? So, we have quite a bit of them now, right? And, obviously they have like the speed, the fees are low, all these things that we were looking for to have a network that's decentralized, have validators and all that jazz. But it seems like, a lot of these protocols are struggling to attract, like users, dApps, developers, and all those things, right? We're actually seeing stuff where, companies are starting to develop their own, protocol instead of, merging to a new, to an existing one, right? So like the theory is like, okay, well, if the current, kind of protocols that are available in the market right now, they're open source, I can take a look at their tech, and technically just make my own, and just onboard my users. We're kind of seeing something like this, like Binance is doing right now. What is your kind of outlook for these networks that are kind of, struggling right now to really like, onboard some of these entities that already have users that would benefit from all this tech, but, they kind of tend to do, create their own system instead of using the one available?
Yeah. Just one more comment to the question before that, because I think it's super interesting, is we don't have much of that stuff right now, but like with Ethereum going to proof of stake soon, and like staking derivatives being actively worked upon on like the whole Cosmos community, like the whole hedging will be a lot easier very soon, especially for customers. Going to your question about like companies building their own chains, like the example you gave with Binance chain, just like a counter question, have you ever used that one? Do you know who validates that chain? Do you know what it does?
No.
Yeah, so like that's what I want to say to like the Binance chain. It's like it's not very transparent what's happening there, what's actually controlled by Binance or other players, who those other players are. But just like regularly speaking, we see a lot of like companies here in Germany or Munich. Like we have a lot of like the big insurance companies from Germany and the big like car manufacturers. They all sit here in Munich, and we talk to them like regularly on meetups, or like we just like know some guys there who are like in charge of blockchain. We talk to them, and most of them currently are building on Hyperledger. They build private blockchains. Which I think is okay, because they just like, they're not ready yet to like tip their toes into the real water. They're just like, they're seeing what could be done with such a technology. And like the reason I think in the end, like they will choose an existing platform is just, if we look at those companies, like there are, of course, there's Facebook with like Libra, and you could say like Google or Microsoft could build their own blockchain, right? But let's say you're IKEA, like you don't have any expertise in that area. You probably just want to have a small application running on a blockchain. Why should you invest the money in building your own thing if you already have all the infrastructure available? The second thing is, if Microsoft would run their own blockchain, do you think that Google would use it? Or that like the Google chain would be used by Microsoft? Like, I think it's really hard for those people to find terms. And so like, there are like programs like Hedera, which are trying to build this council of like big companies to join together. But I don't think that like a single company building something like that would work as a public blockchain infrastructure. And so once they realize that they cannot win this fight alone, I guess they will migrate to those chains that actually provide decentralization and trust from a major community.
It's interesting that you bring up that Google and Microsoft example, because a lot of today's infrastructure of the entire internet is run on Amazon Web Services. So
yes.
Like what would you, like if somebody gets big enough and offers the service and offers it in a cheap enough way, maybe Google will eventually use Microsoft's infrastructure. Who knows? Who knows these things?
Yeah, like, but then like, I guess like Google would have a bigger problem than the blockchain, right? Yeah, no, and like this is a really, really big problem with like blockchains today is actually AWS, in my opinion, because like proof of stake blockchains, it's like they're not like resource heavy usually. Like you can spin up like a Cosmos validator or a Tezos validator on a AWS, a normal instance, and like a regular user cannot like differentiate between those two setups. But like looking at it from the point of view that AWS at one point will maybe say like, okay, I don't like Cosmos being run on our servers because they're taking away our cloud computing users to their platform. We just shut them up. Then we'll be gone overnight if everyone's running on AWS.
Yeah, we're coming up to this conversation on governance, and certainly like you guys are involved in a ton of proof of stake networks. We've seen governance play out, over a long period of time over these 3 years. And as far as the voting is concerned, I mean, when a user actually stakes their tokens with staking facilities, that gives staking facilities more of a voice on these networks. I know I saw one of the tweets you guys put out. You have like 20% of the voting power on Edgeware. So the concerns with proof of stake network and the exchanges that we see kind of gain control of these networks. And there's a huge conversation to have. So let's just start with what is maybe your ethos as well as kind of staking facilities ethos around governance of these proof of stake protocols.
So I would say like governance is a really important tool to organize the evolution of a blockchain. And we have to realize that the forms we see blockchains in right now are probably not the ones we will end up with. So blockchains need to evolve somehow. And you can do that either by having like a thought leader, like for example, Vitalik Buterin with Ethereum, or you could do it by actually using your community and giving away those responsibilities to the community. And so I think the second one is much better, to have the community decide on what they want their chain to look like. And we feel like it's our responsibility as a validator to support the interests of our customers. I know they're not always in line with our own interests. So we're definitely looking at something where we need a lot of tooling in the future and a lot of like solutions. But we already see that in different blockchains where, for example, in Cosmos, you can override our vote. Like if we vote no on a proposal and you say no, that's wrong, I want it to pass, you can always vote yes, and we will not get your voting power. Or in Edgeware, for example, it's the same. Every user can vote with their own tokens. And then you have something like the council, which is like more specialized for certain things where you don't need to ask the whole chain, but you just need to ask a certain group of people. Yeah.
What chains are actually handling governance? Well, I know you mentioned Edgeware and Cosmos there, but are there other chains out there that are handling governance well that you guys have seen? And then I know you don't want to get too dirty on other projects, but are there some projects that are maybe, handling governance in the wrong way? I know we mentioned Binance Chain. There are a lot of these chains where you kind of have that plutocracy playing out with large exchanges gaining a lot of voting power in those networks. What are some good ones, and what are some bad networks that are handling governance in a poor way?
So I think Tezos is a great example for good governance. The last two protocol updates we saw were actually proposed by community members, so Cryptium Labs and Nomadic Labs, which is awesome in my opinion. Like there's the responsibility to keep the chain going and evolving is not in the hands of the actual founders anymore. And also what I really like about them is they have like a high participation governance, and people actually look what their validators are doing. Like there's public shaming if you don't vote on proposals, which I think is great, because it's like in local communities, right? Where you actually look what your like government is doing, and like you can shame a certain person for not doing what you're like, what's the responsibility, which I like a lot. On the other hand, like I wouldn't say like there's a specific project I would like shame with their governance, but just in general, like all those chains we're talking about, I would say except for Tezos right now, has either not the biggest participation in governance. So there's, for example, in Edgeware, to give a negative example for Edgeware, it's not like I like the chain, but there's a proposal right now out there if we should increase the validator set to 100, I think. And we have 11 votes. We have 85 validating nodes on that network. So at least like we should at least get half of that in votes. Like validators should be interested in this problem. So we don't see enough people participating. This is the one problem. On the other side, like I gave a good example of Cosmos. They do a great job, and I have like shout out to Gavin from Figment. He's doing an excellent job on governance calls, like introducing new problems, what is planned for Cosmos, stuff like that. But we haven't seen a single proposal in the last 3 or 4 months, I think. So this is like another problem. Like no one is proposing changes to this chain.
Yeah, that's you're absolutely right. Usually when I talk with these projects, I would ask them a question. Well, how do you guys are going to incentivize kind of or push people to participate, right? In pushing out updates, let's say, or actually getting people to vote for these things, because a lot of people that maybe are getting in, they're speculators, they're trying to just make money or whatnot, right? And they don't really care maybe about the governance, or they don't understand how it works. So it's definitely a huge, problem with these networks to structure it in a way where it's like to encourage participation. I think public shaming is like a really great tool, to do that. So I wanted to ask you about, you briefly kind of covered it in the ETH moving to the proof of stake, right? And ETH is huge. Well, it's basically the index for altcoins, and it has subsectors and like different like things that it's doing. Like we have DeFi, we have like stable coins, we have all these things, right? Smart contracts that are running on ETH. What do you think of ETH, switching to proof of stake? And how do you think it might affect some of these sectors? Is it going to improve things, or is it kind of like unknown, and it exposes kind of a risky environment for some of these sectors where it might backfire? What is your overall take on it?
I mean, I'm really bullish on ETH, to be honest. So I'm like like ETH a lot, and like staking facilities is right now in the phase of planning how will we look on Ethereum 2.0. I see some issues, especially like we talked about with AWS. If you move to proof of stake, and like a lot of people will try to just run a simple node somewhere to validate their personal ETH. So most of this will happen on AWS, I'm afraid. Looking at the technology itself, I see a risk in all those phases. So, for example, in the first phase of the transition to staking, we will see a beacon chain with no smart contract like properties on it, and people can burn basically their ETH on the proof of work Ethereum chain and migrate it over, but it's like unidirectional. You cannot go back to ETH1. And so like there is a lot of interesting facts if you look at it from like a DeFi perspective. There's, for example, like Rocket Pool who will give you like Rocket ETH, I think they call it, which is like an ERC20 representing the right for ETH 2.0, which you can put this token into your DeFi system, and you can basically have like a prediction market if Ethereum 2.0 will work, how long it will take, and stuff like that, which is super interesting. But on the other hand, like there's always the risk that something goes wrong and we realize this whole thing doesn't work the way we think, and like plans go like we'll see like 2 or 3 years longer than we expected. I mean, it happened before, it could happen again. And then like if you staked and you burned your ETH1, they're basically lost until we get there.
Interesting. So that's not going to happen at the time of launch. It has a potential to not even get there. Okay, that's interesting. So prediction here, because we talked about this on our live news segment that we do on Mondays at Layer 1 Live. What are the chances ETH forks in all of this? People that maybe don't want to move to this proof of stake system and want to continue with what's the process is currently, right? Like what are the chances we see some type of fork as we get closer and maybe at the launch of ETH 2.0?
So like with fork, do you mean successful fork, like having a community, or do you think like just a like, fork?
Yeah. So like what you're saying is, are we going to see another Ethereum Classic, or are we actually going to see people use this fork? I guess like, yeah, is there a potential that a minority or maybe like some part of the community actually wants to stay with proof of work and stay with that system?
I totally imagine there will be people who want to stay on proof of work, and proof of work makes a lot of sense in certain things, not in all things. So I can definitely imagine there to be a fork, especially like miners have the interest to keep their machines running and earn money, right? And then what I could imagine like in the future, that either this chain will slowly like die because the community and all the biggest value of Ethereum right now is the ecosystem of developers, right? So like those people will decide where users will actually use their funds. So if staking works and ETH 2.0 works, I'm pretty sure people will migrate over there. But if it doesn't work and there's a hard fork somewhere, I could imagine that happening.
Got it. Okay. So we're kind of coming up to the end of the episode here. Before we kind of break off into the broader crypto market, I did want to like touch one more thing on that governance talk that we had, because I feel like then Tezos is a great case study, right? You gave all these good examples of how they're great at governance. So what did Tezos do? Was it just like a happenstance that they just attracted all these users that actually are incentivized to vote, or like what did Tezos actually do there that other networks can replicate so that they get more more voter participation?
It's a really, really good question. And I don't have like a good answer to that. I would say the Tezos community has gone through a lot of bad stuff. So like the people who stayed and like engaged into Tezos, they are really involved from the beginning. And I think that's a strength. Like they already sorted out the people who are just interested in flipping the coin, making a quick interest, right? So
Gotcha. Okay. Well, that's a good answer. I know I kind of like threw that out of left field for you, but as we kind of hop out into like the broader crypto market, and I do want to talk about crypto and blockchain in Germany and in Munich where you are, but just from like a broad perspective, what else interests you other than staking within crypto right now that you're interested in? I'm sure your head's down at staking facilities, but what other stuff in crypto interests you at this point?
Well, I think that's like one of the nice parts of our jobs is that we can look at cool stuff, new cool stuff every day. So what I'm really, really excited about is like the basic concept of zero knowledge proofs. Like, I think there's so much potential into that. But also what I think like in the last years lost a bit of its appeal with the public is like privacy on chain. So I think that's like making private transactions is super valuable for the ecosystem. And I'm like really excited about projects like Aztec, who brings it to ERC20 tokens. Yeah.
Nice. Yeah, absolutely. You know, especially right now during like the pandemic and what's going on, like in certain different countries where the government is actually implementing certain things to monitor people more than before. We're seeing things in China, you know, where they're using certain, you know, access codes and so on, where, you know, certain people can go to certain areas and whatnot. So like zero proof knowledge stuff and all the privacy is something that's really, you know, it should be the time for it to shine here soon as this continues to escalate in you know, in different countries. So I completely agree with you. That sector is, you know, absolutely fantastic, and I'm looking forward to see it grow. Let's talk a little bit about, you know, what in Germany, how's stuff going on there in regards to crypto, blockchain? You know, what is kind of the feeling there? You know, are there like meetups that you guys have constantly? You know, what is also kind of the regulatory side of it too? Like, are the regulators open to, you know, crypto and blockchain in general, or is it like kind of a struggle to get all the paperwork done, register and all that stuff? Well, give us a little bit of sense, you know, of how's Germany performing in that field.
Sure. So I think the first thing we need to differentiate is Berlin and the rest of Germany, because just like Berlin is like the big center of blockchain, I would say. Like so many projects are based there. There's so many events hosted there. And it's just like, it's a great meeting point because it's really like in the middle of Europe somewhere. And it has like a really open-minded culture. So the whole Berlin mindset really fits well to crypto, in my opinion. And then if you look at the rest of Germany, it's more like more traditional, more like careful about stuff, more trying to work on a corporate level. But we see a lot of things going on there as well. So a lot of like bigger companies are interested in it. Even like policymakers are really open about it. The problem there is mostly they don't know how to handle it. And like, you know, as Germans, we love our rules. So if we do something, they have to be on the point.
Yeah.
So that being said, there's a lot of uncertainty about like regulatory issues, especially for companies like us. So we're currently working with some other validators, but also companies here from Munich and all over Europe with the EBA, which is the European Blockchain Association, to put out a positioning paper on proof of stake to the EU and like also like the German policymakers, especially with questions like, do we need to do KYC for our customers? How can we do that? Can we prevent like money laundering, but also like, do we need to pay VAT on staking rewards? Who has to pay that? And there's a lot of uncertainties, which I would say if those uncertainties would go away, we would see a much more flourishing ecosystem. But still, I think like Germany is on a good way here.
In what way are they in a good way? Because I feel like the pessimistic view is like maybe more growth could happen if there is unknowns, right? If they come out with regulation that's particularly harsh, maybe that could stifle the innovation that's actually happening. So in what ways are they kind of on the right path?
So like there's a lot of talking about it. There's a lot of willingness to look into stuff. And I mean, like we're a company, we're registered in Germany and we're still here. So it's not like they will shut you down from one day to the other. It's just like there are a few uncertainties for the future. And on the other hand, we're way ahead of other countries in the like development. Like Polkadot is based here, like part of Cosmos is based here. I think like we're like that's all really good. Yeah.
Yeah. Go ahead, Dima.
Oh, I was gonna say, what about the banking system? Are they open to working with companies that work with crypto? Because that used to be the case where, a lot of banks would turn away from companies that, are in this crypto stuff that they don't understand. And therefore, sometimes they'll set up an account and then they'll get shut down and then they have to, move to a different bank. Like, are there any issues setting up banking services with companies that are in crypto?
No, I would rather say like everyone here is really excited, like especially if you're talking about finance people, if you're telling them like, oh, I work in blockchain, they're like, oh, that's so super exciting, and I've read something there. What do you think about like the whole issue with like SEPA, which is like the transferring of like between bank accounts, like what do you think like the European version has a chance against the US, but if the US shuts down their like SWIFT system, what are you gonna do if blockchain helps or something like that? So they're really, I would say, more positive about it, more like curious than defensive. And we never had any issues with opening a bank account or something like that.
Well, that's good to hear. It wouldn't be an interview in 2020 without talking about a little coronavirus, a little COVID. Kind of boots on the ground. How is it affecting Munich? How is it affecting Germany? And then from a macro standpoint, the world is kind of shifting beneath our feet a little bit. And in Europe in general is definitely like kind of at the heart of that, right? Like Europe could look very different in 10 years, not let alone the next 2. So like, what are your thoughts about kind of how COVID is shaping Europe and kind of shifting Europe going forward? And then just more specifically in Munich, how is COVID going for you guys?
So here in Munich, like everything is very calm. Like people are not panicking. We had some like panic buying in the beginning, but like nothing where you couldn't get something. Like it was all really calm. We're right now like at a point where like stuff is starting to be opened again. So we're currently allowed to go out again. We are allowed to meet one person at a time. We're allowed to do sports outside, and we have like a lot of like parks here in Munich. So it's really, really nice. You can go outside, you can do sports. I know that there are plans to open schools again, which are discussed right now. For us as like staking facilities, we're currently not able to go to our office, which is fine because we will probably change offices quite soon. So it's right now, it's just like in between offices, I would say. Yeah, but other than that, like the biggest issues we have here is actually like delivery of new servers. So we ordered some servers which should be delivered from Taiwan to the UK and then like assembled and delivered to us, and they're stuck in custody
in Taiwan.
So, yeah. So like one of them came through now, so I'm sure the others will soon too. Yeah, but that's all fine. And then if I look like at the longer like out view of like COVID, I think we will have to change our mind thinking about stuff like cash. Like Germany especially is a country where credit card is not accepted at many places. Like you probably would expect if you go to a restaurant in Munich that you could pay by credit card. It's not always the case. It's sometimes cash only. And stuff like that, which annoys my generation for a long time now. Like we have Apple Pay, but like people look at you strange if you use it at like a supermarket. Like, why is he paying with his phone? How does it work? Is he doing something illegal there? Like plenty of stuff. So like I think like cashless paying or like paying without having to touch someone's money is something we need to think about quickly and find ways to improve that situation. So that's one point. And the other point is like basically the EU as a combination of states with very different interests. And I think like COVID is the first time in a long time that we actually had a common goal for every country and really working together, showing like the European spirit again, which I think is a big chance for the EU to flourish again.
Yeah, absolutely. There's that silver lining there. For sure. It's a super interesting what you shared about, the credit cards in Germany. I actually did not notice that when I was in Munich, but I did carry cash. So
yeah, but that's you've been there during Oktoberfest, right? So like people get prepared for tourists. There's so much cash inflow during Oktoberfest that it's basically different than the rest of the year.
I see. No, yeah, that's super interesting. And like, we have obviously Asia, like in China, where they kind of already have built out the system for cashless society and all that stuff, which is kind of, leading the way, if you will, in the world where when it comes to cashless society and transactions like that. And it seems like Germany is on the other side and is working on their things to make it, to catch up with the rest of them. So anyway, this has been an awesome interview. The last question that we have, we ask all of our guests, is a book recommendation that you would give to our viewers. It could be related to crypto. It could not be related to crypto. It's something you might be interested in. It could be a fiction. Any book recommendation that you maybe read recently or a while ago that you would share with our viewers.
So I've been like, I never read this book completely. Like I always go there and I read like one chapter. I'm like, yeah, well, I have to read the whole book, but I never get to it, but it's still super enjoyable and you learn a lot. Is Principles by Ray Dalio, which I think is an amazing book about like learning how to question other people's views, how to build a company, but also like how to look at markets and like the economy at all. Like with some really cool anecdotes, like how he made it possible that the Chicken McNugget was first introduced by McDonald's and stuff like that. So I really like recommend it. Yeah.
Yeah, I love all the updates that Ray gives. I think he does like little, not I guess long form articles or kind of reports that he puts out for the public. So I love getting Ray's updates on the current situations. But like Dimitri said, man, this was a great interview, Flo. Let's give all the viewers, let's give all the listeners a chance to like find you guys. What social media and also like what websites should they be going to find more about staking facilities as well as yourself?
Yeah, so you can go to stakingfacilities.com to see all our projects, but also our social media accounts. We're most active on Twitter, handle is stakingfac, or on Telegram in our staking facilities group. You can find the link on our website. We're also happy to talk to you on LinkedIn, for example, or if you're into crypto and you're in one of our projects, you probably can also like write us on Discord or Riot Chat.
Awesome, man. Well, this has been a great interview. Thank you for coming on and sharing your insights about staking and kind of the broader crypto markets. It's been a great time. So hopefully have you back here in maybe a couple months and see what you guys are up to at Staking Facilities.
Yeah, thank you for having me. It was really, really a pleasure to be here.
Thanks.
Hey guys, we hope you enjoyed today's episode. Make sure to check out Layer 1 on all the audio and video platforms listed in the description. Thanks for stopping by, and we'll see you next week.